Okay, we can go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you could join me for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consider any changes to the agenda. Does anybody have any changes? To the agenda? Okay, moving on. Election of officers.
Madam Chair, at the risk of being inappropriate, maybe, I nominate Larry Hanson to be chair.
Second.
Any risk of being inappropriate, yeah.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, Larry.
One abstention.
Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Emma Luck.
Oh, you. I'll second that, too.
I can, but
You want.
would you?
I'm on board, I can't.
Oh. Would you?
Well, anyway, I seconded that, so. You can nominate Washington too if you want.
Sure, thank you.
Any discussion? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor
For vice chair.
for vice chair?
Yeah, I.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Next up, we have Keith.
So, point of order, I think this is where
Oh, I'm sorry.
your chair takes over.
Keep going.
I do.
Okay, according to the agenda, we have a budget message and overview of the proposed 2023-2024 budget. Keith says you're up first, or do we want me to go to Tony first?
Actually, we can start with Tony and the budget message.
Tony, you're giving the State of the Union budget message, so it's up to you now.
Thank you, Chair Hanson, members of the board, members of the committee. Again, I'm grateful, having had knee surgery last Thursday, that I can participate virtually and be at this first budget meeting of the year and still be following my wife's instructions to follow doctor's orders and keep my knee on ice. So, as I do each year, I'll read for the record my budget message. And as I do so, really sort of setting the stage, what the committee will hear this evening is largely an operational budget that continues to point in the same direction that we're currently pointing in, largely maintaining the services and the service levels that are currently in place. And I'll get into some detail here as I read the budget message. After I do that, I'll turn it to Director McClung, who will orient the board and the budget committee, the full budget committee, which includes board members, to the document itself. And this is the first of at least 2, possibly 3 board or budget committee member meetings. And we'll make sure we take whatever time is necessary to answer questions along the way as well. But tonight, budget message and an orientation of the document. So, folks in the meeting have my message. For those who might be watching the recording later, I'll read it for the record. Dear Molalla River School District Budget Committee members and citizens, as a district, our decisions and our actions, including this proposed budget, are always based on our core beliefs and values. Board adopted these beliefs and values include the following. We believe every student in the Molalla River School District first can demonstrate personal and academic excellence, that each student deserves a vibrant and self-empowered life, that each can start each day with a desire to be successful and graduate ready to control their own destiny. Each student as well ought to be empowered as confident citizens ready to influence their world. We believe exceptional schools, together with the community, build partnerships with parents and know their children as individual learners. We provide systems of support for each student, personalizing the way children's needs are met. We educate the whole person, intellectually, emotionally, physically, and ethically. We believe exceptional schools are foundational in our democracy and that we teach for a future that we can't yet imagine. As a result, we believe it's our responsibility to pursue exceptional academic achievement for all students in positive, engaging, safe learning environments. To do this, we recruit, hire, develop, support, and retain the very best educators for our students so that we might assure effective communication, positive relationships throughout the community, and active engagement of our public. We maintain responsible stewardship of all public resources, and we pursue the very best for ourselves and each of our students, working from the heart and the intellect to improve our world and the lives of others. A lot of sort of warm fuzzy to set the background there, but I find it helpful that if we're not focused first on students and what our primary purpose is, any of us can be at risk of losing sight. And so with that as the backdrop, those beliefs in mind, it's in accordance with the ORS 294.391 that I submit to you, the Molalla River School District proposed budget for the 23-24 school year. A little bit of background. In late March of this year, the Joint Committee on Ways and Means in Salem released their budget framework for the 23 through 25 biennium, and that framework included among its guiding principles an emphasis on Oregon's K through 12 education. The framework currently includes a total allocation of the state school fund, or excuse me, the state school fund, SSF, of $9.9 billion statewide. This is $400 million short of what many districts across the state are advocating for to maintain their current service levels next year. What will this mean for Molalla River? While many districts are projecting layoffs this spring with the state school fund at $9.9 billion, the Molalla River School District can remain stable into the school year ahead. And this stability is a testament to the board's strong stewardship of taxpayer dollars over time. Long-term stability requires ongoing vigilance. Largely, the district's 23-24 proposed budget is designed to maintain current service levels with various adjustments to improve outcomes for students and families. This is made possible in large part as we head into the new biennium because we have approximately $1.3 million in ESSER, elementary secondary school emergency relief funds remaining. At this time, the proposed budget does include $3.1 million deficit spending from the projected 22-23 ending fund balance. With all of those considerations, and because of the school board's historically strong position financially, the proposed ending fund balance will remain $1 million above the board's minimum threshold of 8% at approximately $4.28 million. With eyes on long-term stability, it's important to recognize that these ESSER funds do expire at the end of September 2024, and we know our projected service levels will not be sustainable in the second year of the biennium without the state school fund exceeding $9.9 billion or further increases in local enrollment. Speaking of enrollment, regionally and statewide school districts have been and are continuing to experience declining enrollment in Oregon. Some possible good news is that Molalla appears to be different. In fact, we experienced sustained enrollment during the 22-23 school year, and we're projecting growth, though conservative, next year. If the state legislature adopts K-12 state school fund budget of $9.9 billion and the district fails to see increased enrollment, the district will experience a funding shortfall of possibly as much as $2 million over the biennium. And that's no small thing. I'll sort of pause there and I'll continue reading in a moment, but that is no small thing. So as the committee is hearing our presentation, we'll walk through what this might mean for us in the second year of the biennium. With ESSER funds no longer available after September of 24 and without enrolling any additional students, if we in fact see no additional students in the second year of the biennium, a strong management plan with community input will be needed as we look to manage resources and minimize the impact to services in the second year of the biennium, 24-25. Among those management plans would be a reduction in one-time spending and existing allocations that fund in-house substitute teachers during the current teacher shortage. And additionally, unsustainable would be our current class sizes, which are generally lower than they have been over the last decade. Finally, there's a sizable uncertainty that remains as we engage in a capital improvement planning process. Without additional capital improvement funding, the district's general fund will continue to decline as we address unexpected failures within our aging facilities. The next 2 years will be interesting time for us. Over the next 2 years, we need to continue carefully managing spending, closely monitor our enrollment, and then we'll need to get very strategic about how we move forward from there. So looking ahead, this is sort of back to the aspirational part. I know that this work of the budget committee is focused on the resources, and it begins and ends in my message with sort of the heart and the message that under board direction, we're currently engaged in a community-led strategic planning process that I believe will deliver a shared vision for our future in partnership with the community. And it's that kind of work that make our region a destination for young families, some returning to the community where they grew up, and others attracted to the values and fabric of Molalla, one of the best places in Oregon to grow and learn. With this background and my continued support of the board's vision and values, I submit the proposed budget for your consideration. And I'll turn it to Director McClung from there. But as we go through this evening, certainly any questions that you might have. And am I correct, Keith, that everyone has, they have the budget document and they can sort of notate as you walk through the document? Great.
Thank you, Superintendent Mann. Again, my name is Keith McClung. I'm the Chief Business Official. I want to thank you guys for coming. This is my first year preparing the budget for Molalla. So thank you for coming, especially the citizen members. I know your time is valuable. So with that, I thought I'd start with just the document itself and kind of walk through what you're looking at. This first section, and that included Tony's budget message, is kind of just facts about the district, what schools we have. Also, I guess I'll start in front here too. There's a table of contents as well, and then the budget message. And then after that budget message, you'll see who our existing principals and schools are. And then the next page, you'll see all of your names and your positions. And then that budget overview page, this is just to give you an idea of kind of the requirements or the format that we take in terms of budgeting these dollars. And so it all starts with the fund. And we've got several different types of funds: government funds, proprietary funds, fiduciary funds. So obviously our governmental funds include like the general fund, grants, capital improvement. Our proprietary funds, like our risk management fund, those funds, and then our fiduciary is like our scholarship fund. So then it goes on to functions, and this is kind of that broad overview of kind of the areas in which we operate. So we have instruction, support services, enterprise and community services, facilities, other uses, contingency, and then the unappropriated and new fund balance. And then below that, there's a little bit more granular details of what the functions mean, right? And what they do. And then on that next page, the object, another word for that is like the account number. So what is it? Is it a service? Is it a thing? Is it a purchased service? Is it a salary? And then even further down is kind of that operational unit. And this is where we number our cost centers. So we've got the district office and then our 6 schools. And then that last page in this area is new over prior year. And it's just to give you an idea of what the headers mean for the year. So when you see FY23, it's for the school year 22-23. Or when you see FY24, it's 23-24. So it's just that last number of the fiscal year. The other thing I want to point out as we get into the details, I left everybody a stack of Post-it notes. If you guys could hold your questions until I'm done, and maybe dog ear or use your sticky notes, and we'll kind of go back to that. That works for everybody. All right, if I could direct you guys' attention to that first page, page 1. It's got 2 sets of data here. We've got our actuals, and it's for the last 6 years, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And then you'll see last year's approved budget or adopted budget. And then FY 24 is the current year proposed budget. And so you'll see a pretty hefty increase over from 23 to 24. Primarily in the general fund. You can see it went from 35.9 million to 39.7 million. And then it's offset by a decrease in our special revenue funds, that next line down. And then the increase in the general fund is tied to increases in taxes, property taxes, and also an increase in bank interest. You guys have heard how rates have risen over the last year. That directly impacts us because the rates in where we have our investments are tied to that. And so when we budgeted this number last year, rates were about 50 basis points. Now they're north of 3, 3.25, 3.5. So that's been a substantial increase for us. And so I'm anticipating that those rates are going to hold true for the next 12 months. And that's why you'll see a little bit more of an increase in the general funds, because I'm predicting a $300,000 to $400,000 increase just from interest. And then also in taxes as our base gets bigger. We have a lot of activity, new activity coming on the tax rolls with the apartments. And so I'm anticipating a pretty hefty increase on the tax side. The other piece on that page 2, on the state line, you can see. Sorry, let me go back to page 1. The general fund, and I'll get more in detail into the increases. But that next line under special revenue, the decline of about $1 million or $950, that relates to the student investment account. And the reason that's lower this year from a budget perspective is there was rollover from last year's budget into the current year. So I'll show you guys in a little bit more detail how, because there was rollover in the 21-22 fiscal year, the budget for 22-23 was higher, but then it dropped back down in 24 because there wasn't any rollover for this current year. So I'll explain a little bit better as we go. But if I could direct you to page 2, again, I kind of talked about the local resource line. That's where our taxes come into play and the interest. The next is that intermediate line, not much change. And then the biggest increase where you're going to see about $2 million is on that state line. And that's where the state school fund comes in. And so this number is reflective of that $600 million increase in the state school fund budget, but also in our enrollment. We've got about 100 more students than this year, and that equates to 140 ADMW. And I can explain that a little bit further as well. So in addition to enrollment, we're assigned weights for certain categories that drive our funding. And then the third piece that's really driving the general fund increase is our beginning fund balance, our beginning cash. Throughout the years, you guys have heard me talk about how we can't fill positions and there's quite a few vacancies and it's left a little bit of a cushion. That cushion is reflected right there. So last year's ending fund balance was forecasted to be 6.2 million. I'm forecasting it to be 7.4 million. That increase is a result of vacancies this year, with less spending. And then down to expenditures, our resources have to equal our expenditures. So that's why you'll see those two numbers tie out to 39,665,165. And one thing I want to point out there is our ending fund balance last year was forecasted to be 3.1 million. This year I'm forecasting it to be 4.28 million. which is consistent with what Tony said in his budget message. Okay, so if you guys can go on to the general fund, it's kind of separated by that first page sheet. And when we get a final draft of dividers, easier to turn to. Okay, this is the actual budget, individual lines for the revenue. And so you guys can see there that top line 1111. That's the property taxes. Then the fourth line down, that's our interest. So you guys can see the increase from adopted FY 23 to proposed FY 24. That $500,000 in that local line is tied to those two lines primarily. Next section, 2,000, I'll skip. 3,000. This is where the state school fund lies, and also the common school fund, and then our state managed timber. And so you can see the 20.9 million versus the 18.9 million. Again, tied to enrollment and also a 6% increase in the governor's budget. So page 3 is all of the general fund revenue. Page 4. This is the general funds full-time equivalents summary. And we've got basically 4 categories: licensed, classified, administrator, and then our supervisory group. 2 primary changes. We added 3 teachers as part of the CTEC program curriculum. And you'll see that reflected in line 3 in the high school programs. We moved from 29 to 32. That 3 increase, or that 3 FTE increase, is then offset by a decrease in 2190 and 2211. Those positions remained unfilled. And so we kind of changed course and reallocated those dollars to CTEC expansion. So there's a net increase of 2 FTE in licensed. Classified, that next section, the big difference is going to be in special education. And while there is a decrease in FTE, it's not a decrease in resources. We've just shifted the resource to include some different things, and also some different hours in some other areas. The next section on page 5, administrators. You'll see we're going from 13 to 14.5. This is as a result of we're adding a technology director. Before, we've been paying through those services through an IGA with Clackamas ESD. And so from a dollars perspective, it's pretty even, but from an FTE perspective, we're adding this one. And kind of the reasoning behind that is cybersecurity is a very up and coming issue. And also just our network and efficiency, and bringing in somebody who's here full time. That's that goal. The other 0.5 increase is within the teaching and learning department. We've added a deputy director, an assistant teaching and learning director, to basically execute the teaching and learning programs. No changes to supervisory. And so net in the gen fund, we've added 2 FTE.
This is only full-time, not part-time.
Well, no, so full-time equivalent basically is the ratio of how many hours that they're working. So you may be one body, but you might be 0.5 FTE and you only work 4 hours a day or 20. So this summarizes just the general fund FTE, and it's about 70% of our staff. Page 6. This gives you a little more granular detail on the expenses. Where do we spend our money? And so a lot of our dollars are tied up into those first two lines. Our salaries and our additional, or excuse me, our associated payroll costs. PERS, unemployment, or excuse me, PFMLI. Social Security, workman's comp. All that is captured in those first two lines. Total purchase services, you'll actually see about a $700,000 increase year over year. With our increased funding, we have increased payments to our charter school. So they're funded through us. And so we highlight or kind of separate that charge. And so about $200,000 of that $700,000 increase ties to the payments we make to MRA.
They're under that total purchase services.
Correct. Yep. So really our spend is, about 5.6 there. Another increase there, relates to bond. We have a big bond program starting, July with Jeremy Wright in Public Affairs. Most of the costs for the pre-bond are happening right now, so that'll be in the ending fund balance item. Another increase relates to transportation. Increased students, an increased cost of transportation, and also utilities. We've seen monumental increases in utilities, not just in usage, but in rates. And so that's about another 100,000. And then also from a T&L, teaching and learning perspective, we are doing the ELA adoption this year. So there's several $100,000 in textbooks to roll out. So that's kind of the reason for the increase year over year in purchase services. Capital outlay, those are for small, large purchases that are district office focused or, in Tony Tiano's world. Other objects, that includes our insurance premium, so, and also and then the debt services and transfers. That 747, we fund the land lab and also athletics. And so that transfer out of the general fund is shown as an expense. It'll be shown as revenue to the land lab and to athletics. So with that, not in that number is this $250,000 contingency. So basically that's if, the world ends, this is our contingency. I want to point out too, that number does seem pretty small. We have other reserves, one being in the debt service fund, which we'll talk about later. There's about $1 million historically in there. We also have the ending fund balance reserve, which is set by the board at 8%. And then finally, from a capital perspective, we have the capital reserve funds, which are fixed asset funds. I'll talk about those a little bit later, but there's another 250,000 at least in those capital reserve funds. So from that perspective, we have much more from a contingency perspective than just this 250 listed. This is just for in the general fund. Okay, so pages 7 through 32 is all of the detail of those summary sheets that I just kind of went over. And we budget by the fund, this is Fund 100, and then the function. And so you'll see all of the functions listed right here. Okay. In each little subtotal, for the most part, you will see increases. So for example, on that page 7, you go to the middle of the page, the licensed salaries total of $10,446,000. It's a little over $1 million higher than last year. That will reflect our 3 additional teachers that we allocated. And also all of the COLAs and step increases that we've given this last year. Again, down below in the classified, you'll see an increase. COLAs, steps,
What's that stand for?
COLAs,
Yes.
cost of living assessment. Yep. It's not Coca-Cola. I wasn't gonna spend too much time on these individual lines at this point, but in the next 2 weeks. When you guys do dive into this, absolutely. I wanna point out. Too, that while I said everything should be increased from a line over line perspective. We've hired this year 6 in-district substitutes. And the idea was to stabilize the current day. Based on just sickness, COVID. We also have a lot of behavioral issues that we've noticed since COVID came back. So we basically hired 6 in-district subs, 1 for each school, and they act as kind of a floater. And so if they're not needed, then they'll do extra tasks. But a lot of times schools will have more than 1, and so they share. So it not only is it a good thing, but it's also built kind of some early morning camaraderie. When there's these panic texts going in which the admin goes, hey, I need this person. So it's really created some flexibility. So with that, I reduced the individual substitute lines. So you'll see an increase in their salary, which is in a different object code. But you'll see a reduction in the substitute line, but you would see an increase in the substitute, the in-district FTE. We're paying for those in-district subs with ESSER dollars. You won't see that here in the general fund. So, but that's why the general funds, the substitute lines are lower, and it's because we have 6 full-time people in another fund who are doing the work. We still have subs, but it's just not at the level of those individual lines. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So yeah, 7 through 28 is all the general fund expenditures. That next section, special revenue funds. So the general fund is designed to carry out any expense that is general to the business, right? Anything that in the normal course of the business. Paying for people, paying for lights, paying for buildings. Special revenue funds, the reason it's called special revenue is because it has to be spent in the spirit in which it was raised. So, general fund says me and Tony can go out and buy tables, desks, and chairs. But special revenue means there's kind of a catch to it. Tony, we're gonna give you $50,000, but you can't buy chairs and tables, you have to buy pencils and paper. So this special revenue, there's a lot of different categories. And so we've separated it between the federal funds, athletics, the land lab, and then the state grants. So all of these funds are special revenue and they're in this 200 series. So on page 29, this again, similar to the general fund, this is the FTE summary for all of our special revenue funds. So these are where the grant funded people live. This is where your athletic director, your athletic secretary live. So with that, you guys can see a licensed FTE increase of 1.5 year over year. To back up, last year's budget included 4 math teachers that were funded by ESSER. We couldn't find those people, we couldn't fill those spots. Math is a tough spot to fill, let alone with temporary dollars, meaning we can't advertise that position as, full-time forever because it's tied to ESSER funds. So we couldn't hire those people, so we kind of pivoted And at the same time, realized that we had this district substitute problem. So we basically shifted gears. Took those 4 math FTE, bought subs with them, and then we added also 2 more. And so that's why you see 4 at the primary level, and then 1 at middle school and 1 at high school. Those 6 are the in-district subs that are being paid out of the ESSER fund. No changes to special ed, but we did reduce the instructional staff development. I believe it went unfilled, and just, again, pivoted and put the resources into those FTE subs. Further down under classified. Again, with SPED, we did some changes, moved those hours around, and we're establishing more in that function 2190. No changes to Title I and no changes to that other attendance and social work. And then on the administrators, I need to point out a typo that I just found here a few minutes ago. That second 0.75 should be 0.5.
In line, in the FY 24.
Yes, in the FY 24 column, in the 2211 function, at 2/3 of the way down.
Oh,
Yeah, function 22. Again, this reflects the addition of Tamara Jackson as the deputy director, so she's split funded. Part of it's coming out of one of these special revenue funds. No changes to athletics in terms of FTE. No changes in terms of the land lab. And then measure 98 is where we start getting into the state funded grants. And again, high school success, there were some resource shifts and some changes. Some of these positions we couldn't fill. So I know a portion of, that classified went to in community services, went up to attendance there in the classified section. The Student Investment Act. 0.5 FTE increase year over year. Basically, again, a little bit of a program change in that we're establishing a coach at the middle school level as part of the high school success. So high school success implies 9 through 12, but there's actually a piece of that program that's pulling in the incoming eighth graders. And so we're basically putting some coach resources there in that transition. Again, offset by a decline in the interpretation and translation services. We were never able to fill that position. And then in ELL, that last section, there was a TOSA position that we could not fill.
Yeah, teacher on special assignment.
You got it. So overall, pretty flat for special revenue in terms of total FTE. All right, page 32. This sheet here, Fund 200 federal funds revenue, this is just for our federal grants. There'll be more other revenue tied to a state grant section here, a little farther down the way. You can see overall, it's pretty consistent year over year. 2.675 million last year, budgeted 2.6 this year. And again, similar to the general fund. Pages 33. Sorry, pages 32 to 44 are your federal grants. ESSER, Title I, Title II, Title III, IDEA. So these are all within those 12 pages. Starting on page 45, this is where we transition into the state grants. The first one you'll see is the Student Investment Account or Student Investment Act. And this is where I want to point out that carryover issue I mentioned earlier. You can see in the adopted budget, it's about FY 23 adopted budget. You can see 3.3 million roughly, and then it nosedives to 2.1 million this year. If you look at 21-22, you see how it says 1.27 million. Basically, we didn't spend it in FY 21-22, so it rolled into 22-23. So if you look at those two together, it's kind of 4 million. And so it'd be 2 million each year. So that run rate is there, kind of at 2 million. So what looks like a decline from 23 to 24 is just an overstatement from last year because we didn't spend it the previous year. But in terms of resources, it's stable. Next one is, the next few pages are, let's see. To page 49 are these SIA or Fund 251, the detail of their expenditures. Again, high school success, measure 98. Sure, a few of you are familiar with the CAT tax, the corporate activity tax. Charges corporations who operate in the state of Oregon, basically a sales tax. That high school success funding is strictly dependent on how well Oregon's economy is doing. And so right now, record kicker. So we can expect those funds again to stay stable. And then pages 51 through 55 is the expenditure detail for high school success. And then starting on page 56, there's quite a few small state and community grants. The big one here is going to be tied to ELL or English language learners. So that's those dollars here. Again, 57 through 59 are Fund 283's expenditure detail. Excuse me, it goes to page 60. Page 61, Fund 285, E-rate. E-rate is the fund where we account for basically discounts, purchase discounts that we get through a company or an organization called USAC. Basically, they create or kind of have purchase agreements with the big tech people. And so we get funding through those discounts. We may have to put up some money, but most of it is funded.
Like for what, like paper? I mean, what kind of
LED bulbs.
expenditures?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's usually infrastructure, so,
Technology.
like, switches, cabling, cameras.
There is a public purpose energy fund down here, I'll mention as well. So E-rate again, technology discounts, is where we handle all those,
So mostly two vendors.
not through vendors, it's through USAC. So USAC handles kind of that side. They'll do the procurement side for us as well, so.
You just have to put in a request.
Yep. Similar grant. Page 287, community grants. Nothing too material here. These fluctuate every year. And then page 64, 65 is the detail. And then page 66, Fund 288 isn't new, but it's new in terms of this presentation. Basically, this is our student body funds or our associated student body accounts. So this is where your clubs live, things like that.
Would you say clubs?
Clubs.
Oh, clubs.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right, 289, athletics. Quite a few changes here, in terms of forecasting revenue. These changes are basically to kind of realign with our existing run rate. I'll give you an example. Concessions on line 1750. You can see it says 40,000. Last year it was 30. And then the actuals for last year is only 11,000. This year's run rate is about 40,000, so I budgeted 40,000 for next year. So that's why those increases, you'll see that. And then the other form of funding comes down through a transfer down in that 5,000 section. And again, the majority of the athletic funding comes from the general fund via transfer. So if the general fund experiences any sort of trouble, right, these transfers would be reduced or could be reduced in the future. Good. Again, 69 through 72 is the detail of the athletics expenditures. So all of our coaches paid with stipends or extracurricular, that all lives here. Fund 290, the land lab, no major changes here. Up through 76 is the detail of those expenditures. And then Fund 298, public purpose energy funds. This is PGE related, so PGE customers pay a portion of their bill. They then kick that back to us. And the idea is to put in better lighting or more efficient heating, that sort of thing. Anything that's kind of utility based or light based to do so, swapping out LED for, you know, big heavier lights that draw a lot of amps. Fund 299, this is where our food service fund lives. And so this is the contract that Sodexo does for us. One thing to point out here is there is a hefty fund balance in the food service. And so we are required to spend that down or create a plan to spend that down. We should basically be about 3 or 4 months worth of operating expense in the fund balance, and we've got substantially more. Again, the special revenue, right, it's food service, so we can't go out and buy footballs with it or anything, right? So it has to be spent on dishwashers, ovens, new stainless countertops, what have you, that basically enhances the food services program. So all of these individual funds are individual because they've got specific requirements tied to how we spend here, exactly. And so that's why they call it special. debt service, page 83. So everybody's familiar with PERS and what the UAL is. It's the unfunded actuarial liability. Means if we shut the doors today, we owe our PERS people this. So in order to manage the ebbs and flows of PERS expenses, in 2002 and 2003, there was a heavy school district presence, and they all went and did these side accounts. Issued bonds. Bonds, we pay interest on the bonds, but we also earn interest. That interest then is to kind of defray costs associated that we have for PERS-based things. So that's what these bonds did, is kind of fund our unfunded actuarial liability. So that if we did shut the doors and owed this money, it's there. Again, there is a contingency in there on that bottom line of 840,000. That's a product of how much we owe. And so if you look at this number in prior years, it kind of goes down, because as we pay our balances down, our exposure gets smaller. So naturally, that contingency will get smaller as we go. And those are scheduled to be paid off in 2028, which, hallelujah. Again, the primary revenue is tied to services provided other funds. So how that works is PERS is basically, this revenue comes from the employees who pay their portion of the 6%. So this revenue comes from them essentially. And then the expenditures, so we'll have principal, interest, some fees associated with our accounts. People who actually hold like the bond paper, US Bank, they charge us $500 a year. So pretty standard. That last page, page 86, gives you a little bit more granular detail of what our responsibility or our requirements are in the next few years. And what this table doesn't necessarily show you is that in prior years, our funds to service that debt, it's been about 2 million. This year, starting this year, and then this coming year, that debt service is about 3.5. So again, we will have some escalating payments. So that's what this fund accounts for. Okay, capital reserve. You guys heard me mention earlier when I was talking about contingency that we have other reserves. This is where that's what this fund does. And so you can see it has a fund balance of about 400,000 this year. We earmarked 250 as an emergency or contingency. The other 150 we leave for, we either accumulate funds for a larger project, or we'll subsidize some other purchases via the gen fund. So the next capital fund is the capital construction excise tax fund. So anytime there's new developments within the city of Molalla, the tax fee collectors will collect those permits. So it's been a pretty healthy year for this fund with all the development going on. So if you look at that beginning fund balance of 277,139, it's bounced back pretty good because with the construction excise tax activity.
Is that only for construction in the town of Molalla?
Correct.
Within the school district.
But not the school district.
It is the school district. Okay. I want to make sure of it. Percentage fee on every permit.
Yeah.
Page 90 is the expenditure detail. Again, for the construction excise tax, we budget some repair and maintenance services. We don't know what those are. We budget just in case we need it. And then also the building acquisition and construction improvements. All right, on to the Fund 601, risk management. This is where we handle all of our claims litigation, if we're paying out anything out of pocket for a claim. You can see in prior years, it's never quite, sorry, on the expense side, on page 92. You've got pretty limited activity in terms of versus what we budget. So for example, we only, looks like we spent about 18 grand last year. But we budgeted, 240, so. Next one, the trust and agency fund, this is our scholarship fund. Again, can't spend all of this, and there's a committee that makes those decisions, cuts those checks. We just do the accounting for it, and that's what's this fund is. So as far as the document goes, that's the nitty gritty. Each section should have a good summary page that will tie to each of those detail pages. And again, in the busyness of the budget, where you see all these pages, the functions, all that, they mean something. And if you go back to that first part of the document, you get a little bit more information as to what that is. So. So now, if you guys would like to go back and go through any questions you have. And again, you guys can submit questions. I don't know how it was done necessarily in the past, but I think Rick accumulated questions and then issued like an FAQ document. I'm happy to do that as well, or answer them the same day, or try to at least. But at the very minimum, I would have those answers to you before the next meeting so that we can ask more questions. But I'm happy to discuss anything at this point. Anything detail related, I might have to get back to you, but definitely do that.
So you're saying you want us to submit email questions to you and then you can respond individually, or are we gonna be CC?
I would basically make a
All see the question there.
consolidated kind of document.
So we're gonna.
And that's been a nice. I was just gonna say that's been a very nice process in the past. If committee members would send that question to Lori Nelzine as the board secretary, copy it to both Keith and myself, or at the very least to Lori, and she'll bundle up all those questions, make sure they're answered by the right people, likely Keith, and then send it back in that FAQ to the whole committee so that everyone can see the responses.
Send to Lori.
So we shouldn't expect to see individual responses, and that's
Okay.
fine, yeah.
Yeah, and then
Be clear.
on May 24th, the second meeting, all the directors will be here to answer questions if need be. So Robin Show, Kathleen French, Jennifer Ellis, Tony.
Is Lori's email somewhere in here?
I'll give it to you.
Yeah, that's perfect.
It's Lori, Lauree. Nelzine, Nelzen. Nelzen at MalalaRiv. K12.or.us. And I'll have her send you guys an email too.
That'd be great.
I got a couple of quick ones I want to
Yeah,
ask.
same here, actually. I got my question at the end, they're quick, so we go into the.
I'm on page 29 and 30. Okay, down at the bottom where it says athletics, we got a 0.5 extracurricular and administrative. Are those people also in a full-time position? It's just that portion of their job is what you're saying here.
Correct.
So they're a full FTE, just part of their job is this and that.
You got it.
Okay, flip over to the land lab, at 0.19, is that a contract service or we actually have what?
That is our custodian,
Okay,
and he basically, yeah, represents his portion of his effort for cleaning and Yeah.
Do we
So-
still have a person out there as a construction lead like Dennis used to do years ago before his passing?
No, not, Dennis's wife is there and she has helped us a couple of times.
But she's not on the payroll or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No, but we still have our other two people who help and.
Okay, so, I just noticed in here, I don't have the exact, numbers, I forgot to write this down when I was going through it, but I noticed the residency stipend, for the licensed staff. Can you just give me a rough idea how many, people, how many licensed staff are taking advantage of that right now?
That's the. Oh, the people that live in the city of Hall.
I think it's around 40.
Cool. Glad to hear that. And, as far as the whole budget. If there was a line item in here for playground equipment at the schools, which one of those functions or funds or whatever would we find that in?
For playground equipment,
Playground equipment at school.
you would find it either in the general fund. Or either one of the two capital improvement funds.
Okay,
And if it hits a certain dollar amount. We would capitalize it.
okay,
So playground equipment is typically lasts about 20 years. It's typically anywhere from 50 to 100,000. So for us, that extended life. Will qualify as capitalizing in the dollar. Anything over 10,000 and over a year of useful life, we would capitalize. So as far as the object code that you would look in, it would begin with an 05. If it's less than 10,000, we would call it kind of a non-consumable supply. And that would be in the 04 object. So there could be several object codes in 04, depending on what it is.
okay. And going back to the very beginning.
Yeah.
Of the, I noticed. On. It was that first page we went through, on page 1, I think.
Yep.
Looking at the first. One, FY 22 versus FY 23. The total, if you take all the different, funds, or whatever it is, you add them all together. For 22, it's 39.3 million. For 23, it's 50.7 million, 50.8. If you flip over to the next page. And you look at all the resources and expenditures. The numbers are different. Is that because they don't include certain items in the prior page?
So from on page 1, that first line item of 39,665 and 65 for the general fund,
Okay, I'm sorry, where are you?
page 1,
Page 1, top line?
that top
Top
line
line,
under general.
right? This
The next page is the detail of that line.
just the 29.
Yes, 39.
FY 2022.
Okay, so I'm looking at FY 22.
Yep.
It says 29,349.
Correct.
Okay. Flip over the page, FY 22. Just looking at the general fund, you can show me where I. Yeah. What I'm not seeing here. Right here, yeah.
The 39.3,
One in this one, okay,
and see what you here to here, or there to there.
well, I'm just wondering, if it looks like.
Yeah,
There's
so.
$11 million difference here.
Mhm.
These, all of these on here, is this just the general fund expenses?
Yeah, just general, so this will be the detail.
So theoretically. This is just the general fund, that's just 29,349, isn't that, and this. Is this one matches the 35?
Yeah.
Here, matches this. 35 right here.
Yeah. So the difference there is,
For some reason, they got these two don't match.
is that.
Which one? That's one here.
So on that first page, the two budget columns are 10, $11 million higher. We're including the beginning fund balance in there. And then the difference between like the FY 22
Right.
actual versus the FY 23 budget. There'll be the beginning fund balance in there and then any underspend.
Right.
Yeah, so it rolls forward if we don't spend it. And so, but the reason those don't tie out is because that 39. Sorry,
That's all right.
that 29,349 probably be. So you take 36 minus that 7, you should get 749.
So would I see that this, whatever this thing is, will be cash, I'm sure it's lower. Well, it is lower, but I mean, it's still, all these things that it adds up to. Yeah, okay, yeah,
It should add up to, where's that?
and it does. That's why. Don't also add up.
So the budget, we include the fund balance,
But there's that one.
in the actuals, we don't. So this is an actual expense,
I got you, okay. Now I get you, okay.
and then. Which it should be those expenses, but yeah. So, I'll take a look at this, great,
Okay.
lock it out, but the reason that the budget call is higher is because we have that fund balance and then any underspend.
Okay. Last question I have.
Yeah.
Well, other than a philosophical question about hiring math teachers. One of the line items in here was for a social coach. What's a social coach? No, I wanna know what a social coach is, not what. I
Yeah,
wanna know what they do, not what they.
I will take my best stab at it, but I will,
And Tony, feel free to chime in here. if you
I think
wanna add any.
in 2 weeks, we would have a much better answer for you, right?
Okay, okay.
But basically coaching those 8th graders
On what?
into 9th grade.
Okay, but like academically, or are we talking?
Socially.
You know, are we talking about academics or are we talking about social skills? Cause it says social coach, it doesn't say academic coach.
Very true,
Right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
gotta say, I don't know at this point. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I can jump in. You know, for example, there's a position at our high school that is funded by the High School Success Act, and his role as student success coach is supporting students in any way they may need. And Tony might need to be pulled aside and coached when it comes to just managing his time. He's got all the skills. He just needs some individual one-on-one around strategies to manage his time and keeping his promises to follow through on assignments. He might need that extra support that he's not getting in other places. Another student might need support because they cannot stop. This is just the reality of it. They cannot stop struggling with another student in a relationship that is really developmentally appropriate, but the student may not have figured out, strategies to communicate their frustration in ways that don't end up putting them at risk of being in trouble. And an assistant principal can do that one-on-one in the office. But a success coach can check in with students in the hallway, hear how the day is going. It may seem like we're providing a lot of extra supports that weren't there when we were all in school, but it's what students need to not be at risk of blowing out of the school day, whether that's at the high school or at the middle school. And that strategy at the middle school is one that looks different because developmentally middle schoolers have more difficulty I'm repeating myself here. I don't know if I've answered your question sufficiently, Director Lockridge, but it's both academic and problem solving and communication. It's those things that get in the way of kids being successful.
So follow-up question, how is that different from a counselor?
It is largely the same in some respects, especially maybe at the middle school level. At the high school level, the preparation for post-secondary work, application for scholarships, the work that our counselors do at the secondary level expands beyond that social skill development. At the elementary school level, it looks developmentally more different than the secondary level. Your question is, what makes it different than a counselor? A coach tends to be out and about in the hallways, and a counselor oftentimes is in their office, connecting with students one-on-one, supporting parents who might need that extra support, managing a student or coaching a student up to apply for college. I think the best people to speak to that would probably be inviting in our high school principal. He could speak to what that looks like on a daily basis.
Okay, so another follow-up question to that, sorry, Tony, is when you look at the salary for someone who's a social coach versus someone who is a counselor, are they about the same, or is there a difference? Just getting down to dollars and cents. Do we save money by having a social coach versus having a counselor? Or
Nope,
do we
the
save
co-
money by having more FTE for a social coach versus more FTE for a counselor? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm not sure where the word social coach comes from. We don't have a job description for a social coach, so that may have been an error on our own documentation. A success coach is what I tend to think about for these positions. They're all licensed positions. They cost the same to the district.
Cost the same, okay. Good
And
deal, thanks, I appreciate it.
should get alerted by, teachers, or other staff members that they're to check in on the student, about how they are, besides observation, are they also getting?
Referrals or references from the teachers, I'm not sure. Tony, did you use
I
that
think
question?
that's a very astute observation that teachers would refer to a coach. Hey, well, Tony's having some difficulty today. Can you check in on him? Counselors certainly do that too. It's another set of hands on deck to support kids in being successful.
Yeah.
I don't need an answer tonight, but I'll give the heads up. I'd really like to see a lot more detail in the breakdown in the classified aspect of land lab.
Okay.
Inherently, a decrease in funding pretty steadily since 2021. And related to that, you know, knowing what's been going on out there from a health standpoint, the caretaker, no replacement made at this point. It appears to me it's like we've flatlined the budget. We have salary growth by contract with our licensed staff, and we've been stealing it out of any of the support on the classified side. And knowing that our custodial is blended in that, not broken out from that, I'm pretty sure there's an increase there as well, that we've been stealing, again, more of the maintenance facilities out there. I'm gonna guess fairly dramatically, and I kind of want to dig into that at some point. So heads up about that. And then the other aspect on line 0139 there, it shows that we had actuals for residency stipend in 21, 22, nothing in the adopted budgets for 23 and 24.
Page are you on again?
Page 74. And currently in our contracts, we do have residency stipend still in place, or do we not?
We do.
And my guess is that would need to be accounted for 20, should have been accounted for in 23, will need to be in 24.
I'm wondering if to now if it's included up above, and so taking a portions, the bottom,
Sure.
a bottom.
Then the other area that just kind of popped a note to me was the area of facilities maintenance cell phones. Actuals way back were pretty minimal to now budgeted quite high, just a change of policy probably there related to technology maybe, but just what I noticed.
Okay, I will
Okay.
definitely take, we'll see.
Anybody else with any questions? Go ahead.
On page 18, we have an increase in our energy cost for electricity. It was my understanding from previous year's meetings that once we did our LED upgrade through the district, that it was going to take 1 to 2 years to see a decrease in our consumption due to the bulbs. But we're seeing a higher cost again this year, when I thought this was the year we'd see the down.
Yeah, and unfortunately, those gains are just being
Just
offset.
too high.
Yeah, it's basically,
Radiation.
yeah, and then, we're also compared, coming out of COVID, so we're naturally there more as well. So, yeah, I don't know if we would ever see a cost decline. We might see a little bit of a flattening from those projects.
From the vote.
Yeah, but I think anything like that is, it's just gonna be,
I thought they were so much more energy efficient that they. You know,
a lot of the utility you're seeing
Yeah.
is heating oil. It's not as much like on the.
and then,
Yeah.
on page 3, it's showing a rental increase. I thought with our lease or rental to MRA, we decreased our amount of money that we were taking in from them. So they're putting it towards capital improvement.
Which page on?
I think it's page 3.
The rentals on 1910 for 25,000. This has to do with facility use.
So for like, sports, stuff like that.
Yeah, Malala Youth renting out gyms or fields. Yeah, or, somebody uses the building.
One last question, did we ever obtain any facility stuff? I know last year in the budget, we were trying to find one where, with the cost of these vehicles, it was pretty high.
Yeah, they did find,
They did.
yeah, when found one, I think for about 20 grand. Yep,
So we got rid of our old brown.
I think, yeah, I haven't seen it anywhere. So they just got a new tractor too, so, yeah. So I'm using it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it just occurred to me, one more question about going back to playground equipment. I don't know if this budget contains anything, I thought I'd just go looking for, this is gonna be easier just to ask. But do you know if there's any expenditures budgeted, not just for this year, I mean, not just for next year rather, but for this year or last year, in terms of any kind of replacement for playground equipment at any of our elementary schools?
No, but Malino has scraped together the money to replace some items.
So when you say they've scraped it together, are you talking about from our budget or from their parent group?
Both.
Okay, but some from our budget.
So, yeah, Elise basically didn't spend a certain portion of her money.
Okay.
And she basically wanted to purchase that, so through some grants or some fundraising, yeah, she was able to procure some new equipment.
Have they, Tony, maybe this is a good question for you, because I've out of here for a year or whatever, but. Do you recall any time when the district budget has included any funds for playground equipment? Since you've been here?
Yeah, so I can recall at least a couple of moments in time, almost 8-9 years ago, where our assessment of all our playground equipment, which included bringing in a facilities expert in playground equipment, our liability insurer provides for that support, determined that we needed to replace some equipment. So 8 to 9 years ago, I recall replacing equipment at Malino in particular, a slide or two. Kids love that equipment, but for safety reasons, it made sense to replace. We have not historically set aside resources in our budget for playground replacement, except for in such circumstances where that equipment might need to be replaced for liability reasons. It's reached an age where it's not a safe piece of equipment to play on, or where it needs to be repaired. I know that we had a piece of equipment at Clark's where there were some concerns around the chemical treatment on the wood. And so we made sure that was treated appropriately. And again, those costs are not lined out in a specific object code within the budget, but they're typically taken care of out of the facilities and maintenance budget.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I can recall.
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Is there a plan either in place yet or continuing to be worked on for an athletic trainer to be sidelined for varsity sports as opposed to the coaches having a role they take? Is that something that
There's $20,000 in there for
to contract, right?
To
No
contract.
company,
but not an FTE.
that's right, but
Yes,
but
but
we have something in place for.
Correct. Yep, I just don't think they could find.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a company, I think, that Davis had found.
Oh,
that
okay.
you have, they have a whole pool of certified athletic trainers that you just say, hey, Friday night from 7 to 10, and it's by the hour. But, and you said about 20,000, so that's the same number that you.
Yeah,
And the second thing is last year, I presented a plan, for $10,000 to be allocated to the athletic director for discretionary training, whatever. And I have a document that kind of shows what Pat has spent the money on, and what he proposes for fiscal year 2024. Can I give that to everybody? Is that right?
I think this is Pat's wish list, correct?
No. That's a separate conversation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is just related to the 10,000 that the board unanimously approved last year.
And you're hoping to put it back.
Well,
Back in the budget this year.
I'm gonna propose, that we increase the number to 20. But this document kind of gives us a beginning place to start with some data.
It's in there as 10 now, but you're hoping to.
Yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
And so what this was used for, and I mean, Malala, we have a hard time getting, I'm calling the A-list coaches from way out of the area, but we're a small country town. We have a lot of people that are dads or moms that either get hired as a paid coach or volunteer as a coach. And so maybe the expertise or the training or the skill sets might not be there. So what Pat Davis did this year is he spent almost $4,000 of that to get the coaches more training, workshops, retreats, clinics. And so you can see 3585 was spent on that. The additional 6415 left out of that 10K that the board approved went to pay for shot clocks and scoreboard in the high school gym at 1,000 court. That's where the 10,000 is. Plan for 2023 and 24. As you can see there, I don't need to read it for you, but huddle camera, live stream capabilities, tripods, new softball scoreboard, if all that was put on one wish list along with this training, around $20,000. So I'd like to see, 15,000 of that going towards our coaches, getting them more certifications, getting them trained, getting them more expertise, whatever their chosen sport is. And if we can do that, that just raises the quality of our athletic department. And I was raised in a family that believed that sports teaches you skill sets and lessons that you can't learn a lot of places in life. And so as far as preparing these kids to go out and tackle the world, you learn from coaches. And so I really want to make sure that we're equipping our coaches with as much skills and knowledge and know-how that we can. And so that's kind of the plan for that money from last year, and I'd like to see that carry over for this year, so. And there's a lot of capital needs that the athletic department has, and he did list a couple of things there for the 23-24 fiscal year. And that is a revised or a very short wish list that he has.
So are these in addition? So we did do some huddle cams this year. I know I thought it was at the high school gym.
Scoreboard and clocks. Huddle cam system.
So that's how good, so MRS is currently paid.
Basically, huddle cam allows you to broadcast it. And so.
Oh, gotcha.
And then, yeah, it's kind of a high level camera that he gets to.
Okay.
There's something similar for baseball called.
On page 2, Keith, there it says, school district currently pays. Maybe that's what you're talking about.
For page 2.
Yeah, page 2, it says current huddle camera costs. It's $9,400.
Yeah,
Is that what you're referring to?
is that stuff that was done this year?
Second page, yes.
Oh, okay. so-
Yes, yes.
I apologize, I thought you were proposing it.
But in talking to the coaches that have been the recipients of these clinics and the training, it's been phenomenal. In the past, a lot of coaches have to pay out of their pocket. And that's great too, but I think the school district needs to be paying for continuing education for our coaches, not just for teachers.
So Mitch, if I could address that, you
Yes.
can see if you go to page 68. You see how the proposed FY 24 column at the bottom there, 771, 711.
Yep.
You compare that to 23, it's about 28,000 more. So your revenues increase to support that. But also, if you go to page 70, line 0389,
The 10,000.
the original 10 is already in the 56. So 66 this year is,
So if there would be a change, it'd be request 10,
no, I'm saying
Additional.
your 10 is in there,
10, but not 20.
your 20 is in there.
The 20 is in there.
Yeah,
You raised,
50, you look in FY 23, it's
Yeah.
56.
all right,
So your original 10 was in that 56, and then when you're talking with Pat, you wanted to put in that professional services line. But again, you can spend that anywhere in the 03.
it's discretionary.
Yes. But as far as the additional dollars, it's reflected in the additional revenue and then the additional expense on that 0389.
That's a good point. Athletics gets the money.
I just wanted to hear you,
Somehow, you what?
I'm kidding, no.
What'd you say?
I said I wanted to hear you.
Oh.
No, it was more, yeah, I just wanted to,
It was a setup.
no, I just wanted
Okay,
to.
I see. We got 20.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
are we continuing with our SRO agreement?
Yep,
Okay, and also, do we have anything in the budget for school safety camera security,
we added,
but in the next coming budget?
well, I did it this year, so we added, I think. 51 or 41 cameras.
So all the cameras that we have right now those are the cameras that we're gonna have budgeted going into next year as well.
Correct, yeah, so we added 17 at the high school, 14 at the middle school. And that covers all dead spots or blind spots. And then I think we added a few here, and then a few at various elementaries. So, yeah, there isn't a plan to purchase any more cameras at this time. Until we do like the bond planning.
It was of my opinion, as we did the walkthroughs, now granted, I know that the middle school got ones that added right after we did.
Yeah,
Probably the high school seemed like it had the best, they were ever good, but at the elementary school. You see like 4 cameras, and I was hoping that we would have more, principals expressed more,
okay.
just to throw it out there.
Yeah, I know that the risk at the middle school and high schools,
Yeah.
they're bigger and they've got different audience, different clientele, so. Yeah, and it was really important for the middle school and high school to get the blind spots covered, and they still will tell you that they don't have it. We're looking into vape sensors as well.
Oh, wow.
When you say vape, are we talking about, okay,
So, cigarettes,
Gonna be in trouble, man.
permeates, the
Right.
vape doesn't,
Doesn't.
yeah, so, yeah.
So, and
You're-
we've
you're-
gone
you're
what I
12
heard from Sonny,
my 12-year-old, yes.
and it was, he said, low hanging fruit, that's where we wanna go. And he mentioned that we had an issue with our intercoms, now when we did the walk through the schools, we have our new intercoms. Was his, what he wanted, was it just that they would be wireless, where ours are not, was what he was suggesting to us? And his
Who,
assessment, it was a gentleman who lead on security,
the wireless intercom
Yeah.
system.
so was
Yeah.
that why he didn't like our.
Yeah, there isn't any plan to do that as far as upgrade or create a wireless intercom system. Not that I'm aware of.
Keith, just follow on, that next question, you said there were 41 cameras added, have those all been actually physically installed at this point? Okay. Cool.
I think it's 40.
I know we installed a lot.
And these were the higher ends.
Okay.
Well, cameras.
Keith, you have any more? Okay, so email questions or get questions to you, you'll put out a summary sheet for everybody to get. Tony, do you have any more?
Hello.
No, I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Zoe, Linda? I
I
can't,
just have one quick question.
go ahead, Amy.
Sorry. Is there a deadline that you want the questions to you by, maybe like the 23rd or
Yeah,
earlier that week?
yeah, probably the 23rd. Yeah, if you guys get most of them to before that.
Okay, moved by Roxy, seconded by James to adjourn, all in favor? There we go. Get her done.